Welcome to the journey. I'm Nathan, and this is the Modern Bushido Project.
All right, welcome back. We got our second athlete session here with Mick. So Mick, how are you liking the Train Heroic app so far?
I'm really digging it.
Nice.
I'm feeling some really good results with it. The strength gains have been nice this
Nice.
past little bit of session. It's really shown up in the mat sessions with jujitsu and just overall just moving stuff.
Good.
So feeling good with it.
I got a question because I forgot to ask Ed last night. When if I post like one of my workouts, do you guys see that in your little feed?
I don't think so
Okay.
unless there's a way to
Because I see
look at it.
everybody's feed and I just don't know what I don't know what's on the athlete side.
The only thing I see on the athlete side is like when you've done some of the tack fit conditioning
Yep.
sessions, and like I'll see Ed's like
Sure.
when he'll post, and I think everybody sees those,
The scores, right.
the scores. But
Yep.
other than that, I don't see other people's sessions. I don't see your sessions.
Okay.
Like I know just from our conversations, like right now with the programming, I'm like 2-3 weeks behind you.
Yep.
So, but other than that, that's all I know.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was just always curious. I was like, I don't know if like it says post a team and coach, and I'm like, all right, let's see what happens. I don't know if
Yeah,
anybody sees it.
yeah. I don't know. I maybe on a couple of my workouts, I'll try and do that, and we can ask Ed or some of the other guys. Like, are you
Yeah.
seeing other dudes' workouts?
Hmm. Yeah, because I can see everything and I can see, like and that's the cool thing about Train Heroic is, like I'll see your readiness. If your readiness is like really low, like I can hit you up, be like, hey bro, what's up?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's something you don't get with a lot of apps or a lot of other
yeah.
programming and stuff like that. So I
Yep.
thought that was kind of
And you've
cool.
done that a couple times with me. I know where you've been like, "Hey, dude, like your readiness is really down." I'm like, "Yeah, because I got this, and this going on,"
Yeah.
and you've been like, "Okay, yeah, just dial the numbers back a little bit and just
Yep.
flow with the day."
Yeah. How's speaking of which, how's the recovery stuff going with that little cheat sheet?
Oh man, that thing is a lifesaver. Um,
Nice.
that thing, I live and die by that recovery worksheet and
Yep.
that readiness state. Like I think even if you look back a couple weeks or last week, I was due to do a leg day,
Yep.
and I did my readiness, and I was like, and I already knew
Two.
it before I even looked at the numbers. I'm like, I'm in the dumps. I'm gonna move that to tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'm gonna spend some time on a recovery walk, some mobility,
Yep.
and doing some binaural audio to get myself ready for the other stuff that I have to do today that I have
Sure.
to do.
Yep.
And that kind of that little readiness cheat sheet and that recovery worksheet, that stuff has been a lifesaver.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So for those of you out there that don't know what we're talking about, Cal Dietz has it's basically like a recovery cheat sheet, and it's based on a scale 1 to 5. And Train Heroic just coincidentally happens to rate the readiness on a scale of 1 to 5. So therefore, we can say, hey, if somebody's a 4 or 5, probably can do the same workout. If they're 3, maybe they can do one recovery modality. And if they're say a 1 or 2, now you can really look at digging into some very specific recovery strategies, especially for a guy like Mick who's got job performance type stuff that comes up and has got to deal with that. So yeah, it seems super helpful. And then some of the other recovery stuff, like have you gotten to the optional? Like I know the optional knee health stuff has been pretty helpful for you.
So I've been trying to hit at least twice a week some of the tack fit mobility stuff.
Yep.
You have it programmed in there every day, and I'll just
Yep.
jump around and hit the
Sure.
different ones. But I'll hit those, and then the knee over toes stuff has been I've laid off of it a little bit right now.
Yep. Same with me.
But I'm coming back into it, and
Yep.
those things, man, it's the difference it makes in coming into. So like tomorrow is basically a recovery day for me in my programming. So
Yep.
I've got attack fit mobility. I've got some knees over toes stuff. I'll do that before I go do jujitsu and all of that stuff that I normally would do. And it'll just make a world of difference. So I'm even starting to plan, like today, I went and got a massage after my workout today, knowing I've got tonight all the way into tomorrow
fully
to do this massive recovery set before I get into the work sets on Thursday and Friday, which that's the secret to the program, in my opinion.
Yep.
Is that holistic approach to how it all comes together.
Yeah, man, it's been pretty good. How often do you get massaged and soft tissue work?
Usually I've been bad about it, but like now I'm back onto once a month, at least. Just a general, I've got one masseuse that I work with. She's phenomenal. She comes in as like, yep, it's going to hurt. Here we go. kind of work. And then at my agency, we actually have an in-house athletic trainer. And if I get something acute, I can walk in there and she can hook me up with at least some Theragun work and some manual manipulation if it's something acute. So at least once a month, and then as needed if I get something that's really hanking me up, my shoulders or my elbows or something like that.
So speaking of agency, if let's just kind of run down kind of your background, your history, and kind of what you've done with training up to this point.
Yeah, sure. So I'm coming into my 25th year of full-time law enforcement. I got a little bit of time part-time prior to that. Most of that time's been in patrol. The rest of it has been in training. And for 22 years of that, I had the collateral assignment of SWAT and did that on top of all my other jobs, living that on-call life, and decided 22 years was a nice round number to punch out on that. So I did that recently. But during that time, I was an assaulter, team leader, and then retired off as team commander. Outside of that job, I run a martial arts gym, and I'm a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Just got my first degree on my black belt this past month, and 3 years as a black belt. Time flies.
Yeah.
Been doing martial arts for 30 years, Jiu-Jitsu for 20 of that, kickboxing, Filipino martial arts, a little bit of everything. Right now, my main focuses are those combat sports, jiu-jitsu, kickboxing, wrestling, because those are good modalities for us for what we do. So, but yeah, that's it as far as job wise. And then training wise, besides the martial arts stuff, always played around with the weightlifting stuff, jumped around program to program, strength and conditioning, did a little bit of everything from Martin Rooney stuff. Even as far back, I one of the first books I read was Charles Staley. I think Staley.
Yep.
Charles Staley's Strength and Conditioning for Martial Artists.
Yep.
And so always been trying to play around with it. I've had some local strength and conditioning coaches, but that's been hit or miss.
Yeah, man. Charles Stanley, speaking of him, he had a workshop. Oh, man, it must have been 2013, 2014 with John Brookfield. And I somehow won basically entry to this workshop with him, John Brookfield, doing the full battle ropes certification. And then the day prior, we did like all sorts of crawling and chains and like all sorts of crazy stuff. I don't know if you're familiar with John Brookfield, but he's a dude who just like, I just decided to pull a tractor trailer uphill for a mile because why not?
Right.
Just like, oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah. He's just he's just a really big, kind of quiet dude. He's just like, hey, what's going on? Real quiet. Man, he will just go to work. You're just like, dude.
Yeah. Wow.
It's nuts.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember the Staley book as being like, that was probably the first book that I read that was like talked about periodization, was something that was besides like, 3 sets of 10
Right.
kind of programming, and sort of started to get me thinking about programming and strength and conditioning to supplement what I was doing that was something beyond the basics of what we see in the high school weight room.
Sure. Now with the training stuff, have you noticed a transfer to profession, not just the martial arts stuff?
Yeah, for sure. So on the professional side, definitely my mobility coming out of the cars, things like that. My mobility on doing something like a lot of Dave Spaulding's movement drills on the range, where you're making these rapid point-to-point movements and then settling it back down on the gun and getting in there and being rock solid as you come in there, and then being able to punch back out on it. So those sort of things, I've noticed a big difference on, and just generally like my mobility and like my physical state, like my ability to be active for the 8 hours that I'm working. And I think that's really helped as well. So, but definitely the mobility piece of it, the strength component of it, definitely there, but you just don't notice it. I see that same translation on the mat. I can tell you, like, laying hands on people, moving people around has been a lot easier.
Sure.
Wearing the gear has been a lot easier.
Nice.
But the mobility stuff of being able to rapidly move and then set myself, I've noticed a difference in those time hacks.
Awesome.
on drills. So yeah, for sure.
So what have you felt has helped the most over the last, I don't know, however many years, 20, 30 years training?
So I think probably the biggest component for me has been finding stuff like this, where it's kind of holistic, where I'm working mobility and strength. Strength at the end of range has kept me relatively healthy. Again, when I look at the cops at 48 years old, I'll be 48 in January.
Yep.
Their ability to just generally move is pretty limited in a lot of them. Even guys that did a lot of athletic training, because there's such a strength culture in LE, like strength, just be as strong as you can. But they're doing strength without any mobility. And like, you got guys that can't touch their toes now, guys that are just a couple years ahead of me, early 50s, and they're already in their first knee replacement.
Right.
Whereas I'm, pushing 48, because I've done that combination of mobility and strength and conditioning. I'm still mobile. I'm still active. I'm still hitting the jiu-jitsu mat 4 days a week, kickboxing 3 days a week, minimums. I'm still able to get out in the cars. I'm still hanging with the young guys. And I think it's that combination of things. We see so much in the LE physical culture that it's just strength. Or you got the other guys on the other end who are still like, the academy's all about running, and all they do is run a lot. So both of them are in this conundrum where their joints are just breaking apart and nobody's doing any mobility work.
Sure.
And I think that's a big component with it, in conjunction with the strength training and then the cardio base kind of stuff. I even see that too in the martial arts stuff. Again, like a lot of the folks that I started in jiu-jitsu and kickboxing with, that were in the same age group, they're not training anymore. And when I look at them, it's similar things. It was either guys that were all about the mobility. So they were only the all about mobility, flexibility thing, right? Kick higher, have an elastic guard kind of thing. Or they were all about the strength training. And now none of those guys are training. And the guys that I see around me that are still training are similar. They were running mobility, strength, and conditioning, and they're still healthy enough to be doing the sports.
Are you familiar with Cal Dietz's 2-spring model? I think I may have posted the video once or twice, but
just from the video stuff that you've put in the group.
Because that kind of remind me, you know, the whole stretching versus strength thing. So for those of you out there, the basic concept of the model is that you have tendons as one spring, and then you have muscles as one spring. And if one is larger than the other, you're going to tend to pull the opposite. So if your tendons are stronger, you're doing a lot of plyometrics, you're doing a lot of dynamic stuff, you're going to have strong tendons, but your muscles are going to be weak. And vice versa. If you do a lot of powerlifting, you do a lot of strength stuff, a lot of bodybuilding stuff, muscles are going to be big and strong, but your tendons are going to be weak and you're going to pull tendons. So that's kind of the basic concept, is to balance those out. And I think that's probably the same with the stretching and the strength, and, you know, just trying to keep a balance between the two. You got to have enough mobility, but at the same time have enough rigidity in strength to be able to perform force application.
Yeah. I mean, that's, you know, that's the thing is like, you got to have that rigidity to apply that force when necessary. But on the flip side, if you can't accept force and have that ability to accept some force, then it's a problem for you too.
Sure.
And that's where I see it. I, you know, see guys at work who can, again, they can deadlift a ton of weight, but if they jump off the back of an armored vehicle, their ankles are gone. You know, they got to step down off those things. They can't spring out of them. They bam, gone. So, you know, I think that's, yeah. So, and like Cal stuff with the spring theory, that's probably been one of my biggest things. And I think I talked to you about this early on, is the ankle work and the footwork has made a tremendous difference in my ability to accept that force again. You know, as much as I was doing, that was an area that I was really neglecting. And I didn't really think about. And spring ankle has been a huge benefit for me.
You know, it's interesting. I was watching interview with so Chris Korfus actually created all those exercises, and Cal just kind of renamed them and took it because that's what he likes to do. But they're good friends. And so they were talking, and what Chris tells a lot of his high school athletes, he's like, you know, he deals mostly with sprinters and track and stuff like that, and then team sport for speed. But he tells them, he's like, hey, if you want to come in like third place, he's like, do it once a day. If you want to come in second place, do it twice a day. If you want to come in first place, you need to do it 3 times a day. Yeah, that's just how important he tries to make it to the young athletes, especially. Yeah, you get older, you kind of run out of time. But you know, as he said during COVID, like there was a lot of kids who just like had nothing else to do. They had no way to train. So he's like, you know, 5 minutes a piece, you could do 15 minutes throughout the day, you know, split up into 3 5-minute sets. And so you're just doing so much for your athleticism to be able to build that strong foot and that strong foundation. Yeah. It's made such a difference for me in terms of just how my ankles and my knees feel. Just day to day. But then again, that mobility piece, I can feel the difference coming out of cars, getting moving. I can feel the difference. I still make a lot. My guys in the gym make fun of me about all the cracking and popping that I do, but I'm like, I'm still doing it. And you know, even something as on the sports side of it, ankle lock defense, you know, again, the ability to accept that force
that ability to create rigidity at the same time, or when needed, go between those two,
Yep.
Has made a big difference. On the sports side of it, my standing passing, which kind of translates again to that mobility piece. I'm much faster on my feet now than I used to be. I used to be a low pressure passer. I'd stay on my knees, and now I'll stand up and cut around guys and cut through them.
Nice.
And that's that spring ankle and some of that ladder work and things early in the program that we were doing that, we rotate back to, but it makes a big difference.
The agility stuff and all that.
Yeah.
Yep. So kind of in the same line, what have you noticed throughout the years and decades that you've either seen in yourself or others that kind of were not the best options for training? Like some of the like, hey man, that was a really bad idea. I don't know why I did
it. And I'm sure I'm not going to be the only guy to say this.
Sure.
But the CrossFit stuff, the outside metric stuff,
I'm this strong and it's cool.
Yeah,
but
right. Yeah. The sort of chasing numbers because somebody said that's the number for being strong.
Right.
Or this, if you can do this many wall balls or this many clings in this amount of time, you're fit.
Right.
That I've seen a lot of people get injured out of that. B, not make any difference in their training. C, I've also experienced both those things trying to do that.
Sure.
It's hard to argue with a number like, hey, if you can lift 2 times your body weight on a deadlift, you're strong. Well,
right.
Yeah, you probably are. Yeah.
Yeah.
The question becomes is, do you need to be that strong for what you're doing?
Sure.
And are you chasing a metric that you don't need to chase, and that you are ultimately burning time away from task specific work things that you need to be working on? I always talk about this. I talked about this with both my combat sport athletes and my TAC guys. I'll be like, I would do our training sessions before I would go to SWAT training, or before I hit a shift, or before I went in to do jiu-jitsu. And I'd be like, hey, I can do that because it's built around me being better prepared for those things that I'm getting ready to do. Are you guys doing workouts that you're so smoked at the end of that you can't go do this training? Well, if that's the case, in my opinion, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, my opinion is that training isn't beneficial to you. You should be able to walk out of a training session with a little bit of recovery time, maybe some, nutritional recovery, things like that, and go work a shift. Go on a SWAT call out, go hit the jiu-jitsu mat, go hit the kickboxing ring, with a little bit of recovery. It should not affect you that much.
Right.
What I see so much of is dudes that, they chase that external number that some coaches put out there that has nothing to do with what their job application is, right? And isn't taking in any other factors. And it's just like, yeah, man, this is the big number you got to hit, or, this is, you got to do this workout of the day 3 times a day, or 3 times a week or whatever.
Right. And
it just doesn't, you're taking time away. To me, it's very similar, like in the shooting world, like we talk about how fast do you have to draw?
Sure.
Right. What's fast enough?
Right.
Right. And how much time do I spend chasing a sub-second draw, and that takes me away from other skills I should be working on to be tactically proficient.
Right.
You know, it's that balance. And that's the biggest thing I see is people chase these external numbers or external programs that people that have nothing to do with their field of endeavor just pull out of their butt, you know. Or maybe it applies to their field of endeavor and they've decided it applies to everybody's field of endeavor. And that's what we're going to do because that's what I'm good at. You know, that's what I see a lot of.
So I see, and to kind of answer your question, I kind of see two sides of that. Is I see a lot of that type of stuff would be okay in like an off season. The problem is that in, you know, the career fields that we work in, there may or may not be an off season. Right. Military side, you may have 3 years in between. Cool. Like you've got time to, you know, burn yourself out. And hopefully you're not burned out by the time you deploy, but you may have that intermittent time versus law enforcement, firefighter, you know, that kind of stuff. You may have to do that the day after your shift, you know, when you have 2 days off to recover. That may be the only time you can apply it. That may be, or your vacation time might be the only time you can apply it. The second component I see is the 4 coactive model. You've got, and I like the way that Buddy Morris describes it, is that the physical state of the body affects the psychological state, which then in turn determines what technical skills you can apply, which will then determine the tactics you can use. And so I think that's an easy way to think about it is like, all right, whatever my physical state is right now is going to determine my psychology. And those two combined are going to determine what technical skills I can actually apply and then be able to put that into tactics. And I think those kind of things, that's really what we're looking at is like, how much are we focused on tactics? How much we focus on the technical? How much we focus on the psychological, you know, and not just the mental health, but the actual like sports psychology and the, you know, the aggression and all that stuff that you need on shift. But then, you know, how much we focus on the physical and is that important? Or can we combine all those into a drill and say, hey, let's do this drill that is now going to focus on the technical skill, the psychological, a little bit of the physical, and kind of wrap all that up in a nice bow.
Yeah. And I think, and again, I'd be interested to hear your perspective on this. I think too, when you talk about that psychological component of it, you know, the physical component affecting the psychological component, I think when you have stuff out there where you're like, hey, these are these numbers you need to be hitting, without it being tailored to the athlete specifically, you know, so I don't deadlift twice my body weight. I'm not there. Right. But since I've been on program, my deadlift has increased. And my performance of my deadlift has increased. So I'm moving better with my deadlift.
Technical skill. Yeah. My
technical skill of it. Is that a better thing to have on the psychological side to say, hey, I'm having numbers and technical increase in the weight room, which is going to give me more confidence, more aggression, you know, more calmness also because I'm more confident. When I go out and hit the street. I think it does versus, you know, you got these guys who are like, you got to get this number. You got to get this number. Well, if I don't get this number, then I'm weak. And if I'm weak, then, you know, I'm not going to be strong enough to use this tactic or do this thing. And it's like, you know, just if you have this confidence coming out of the weight room, it makes a difference. Now, I mean, we don't want that to be falsetto. We don't want that to be false. But if we're seeing that improvement in outcome, aka weight or time, and improvement in the process of it, so that person's, you know, their movement looks better, and they're coming out of those sessions healthy, that's going to help their confidence. And I think that's a big part of whatever we do on the physical side, is that that mental confidence coming out of, yeah, man, I just had a good session, or I had improvement in this session, versus, oh, I didn't meet the time on this thing that somebody posted out there that I should be doing,
Kind of gets back into, when you don't hit a metric, that doesn't matter, like, did it actually matter, or do you care? And a lot of athletes can't distinguish because somebody said, hey, this number matters. But when they actually look at the application and the transfer to the skill that they're looking for, it probably doesn't. And again, that psychological starts coming in where they start getting in their head. They're like, oh man, I'm not hitting the numbers. I'm not making it. You can start going down that rabbit hole, the what do they call that spiral? The negative spiral. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing. Like, as we start getting into looking at more like the 4 coactive model, how much time are we spending in each of the 4? And then it's always surrounded by health, so the health is always the most important, because if you're not healthy, you're not performing as well as you could be.
Yeah, that's another thing, like, especially, on the LE side and the fire side and, deployed military, that health aspect of sleep and nutrition, coming off of, I did the majority of my career broken up in different times, but if you broke down all my years, I've done over half of it on night shift. And
that's
I can, yeah. So when I got promoted to my current rank and I went back out to a shift, I went from training division to night shift.
Yep.
And I was happy because I was like, man, I'm back with the kids on night shift. We're gonna go out and tear it up. And it was great. But night shift at 42 was a heck of a lot different than night shift at 32, which was a lot different than night shift at 22.
Yep.
And after a few years, I was like, man, I need to make a no matter what I was doing in the weight room, what I was doing on the mat, even nutrition wise, short of straight up going on like testosterone therapy, and some hormone therapy, I was in a losing battle. I was like, it's time for me. I got to punch out off of this shift. I need the change. And man, instant, right? No matter what I was doing in those 4 areas, it didn't matter, because I was in that spiral of lack of sleep, lack of sleep led to poor nutrition, which led to more lack of sleep, and then once your hormones are in that
done
that dump, there's nothing. You can go and hit the weight room all you want. You can try and do whatever you want, but once it gets down there, it gets bad. So, that's very true. If you don't have the overall health, which is the other thing, like, is, paying attention to that readiness state really helps sort some of that out.
Sure.
And again, kind of looking at some of the stuff in the program, some of the additional stuff, like I know, 2 big things I got from your YouTube video that you posted of your minimalist walk around of your place.
Yep.
ZMA.
Yep.
Baller.
Yep.
And
lights out.
Neurofuel.
Yeah.
Huge. Those 2 things have also made a big difference, but probably ZMA is probably the biggest thing,
because you get the magnesium and you get the zinc, which helps testosterone support. I mean, good sleep, muscle relaxer. I mean, magnesium is responsible for, hundreds of processes in the body, and you don't get enough. And if you don't get enough, then you don't absorb vitamin D through the sun and lots of other issues.
Yeah. But like, that's the other part that I see is, dudes they'll be hitting the weight room nonstop. They'll be working on their tactical stuff. They'll be working technical. They'll have, a lot of good stuff going for them, but they're just running themselves in the ground. They're not building any recovery in.
Yep.
they may even be eating right, but they're not even really looking at supplementation a lot. Anybody that has a job with a certain level of stress, especially the physical stress that when we talk about a tactical athlete, you got to be using some supplementation like ZMA. I think the NeuroFuel, Alpha Brain, those sort of things, that's the wave of the future.
Yep.
If folks aren't doing that stuff, they need to be looking at it. I think for older dudes, like some of the stuff with creatine and using it for supplementation is really helpful.
Yep.
For those older athletes that are trying to stay in the game. So yeah, I think that overall health model, you got to look at it, and dudes don't.
So in
they just run themselves in the ground.
Yeah, 100%. And so my 2017 tour just kind of tie into that. So I was living in a fire base, living in a hole in the ground. I mean, the worst conditions you can think of in the modern military age. Most people are used to very built up, established bases. This was not. And everybody's always talking about combat fitness and readiness and blah, blah, blah. I sent 2 people home in the first 30 days for medical. Had nothing to do with physical capacity. What I found is that your first 6 weeks, you're going to get in shape for whatever you're doing. So you should probably have a general level of fitness before you get there, just so you don't get crushed right out of the gate. But within 6 weeks, you're going to be in shape for whatever you do. Yeah. It really comes down to your general health. If you've been a smoker, if you've been drinking a lot, if you've been, consuming just junk food for years, like you are going to struggle in that environment. The environment alone will just eat you alive. And that general health is really what's going to get you through it.
Yeah.
Obviously a little bit of supplementation will help. I had nothing but MREs for, prepackaged meals for 7 months. Awful. I'm still dealing with some of the side effects of the digestion side from that, but I was able to stave off a lot of the issues just by having some digestive enzymes while I was out there, and just some daily multivitamins and greens powder. But if I hadn't had that, man, I mean, I'm telling you, the general health is just, I think people underestimate because we live in such established societies. You go camp for a couple of days, you're like, oh, it's not that big a deal. When you start living in that environment, there's no sanitation, you're pooping in a bag, if not just a regular hole, you're burning it at the end of the day. Like it's a nasty environment, and it's not your home. So you're not used to all the parasites and bugs and stuff like that there. If you eat the local food, you're going to get sick, so there's just so many things going on. You've got to have general health.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's, it's the same thing for us, like obviously not to that extreme, but, doing a hostage job, a SWAT call out, and, we're out on the scene for 17, 18 hours on a perimeter. And like, you would like to have your nice, salad with, grilled chicken, but somebody brought a bag of Egg McMuffins, and you just need calories, man.
Yep.
But you put that in, but if you're already at a low base of health, that stuff is going to really affect you,
Yep.
And you're sitting on a cold perimeter for 7, 8, 10, 12 hours. You're going to have a level of performance deficit. Everybody is, but if my performance was already here because I was healthy and doing some stuff, and yours is here, and we both dropped at the same time, you may be below mission
threshold.
Capable, right? So you got to have that. And it's the other component of it is longevity, right?
Yep.
In law enforcement, in my state, you're vested at 20, but you cannot collect a retirement until you turn 52.
Mm-hmm.
So, when I turned 52, I'll have had 29 years on the job.
It's a lot.
It's a lot of time. You want to get everybody there, and you want to get them to the point where at 52, when you retire and you start getting that retirement check, you can enjoy it. You can
have a life.
You can have a life. You can go do stuff.
Yep.
You know, you can go do the things you want to do, whatever that is at 52.
Sure.
You know, but it's that longevity component too, that some of these guys, young guys that I see right now, you know, they're out again, they're going to burn themselves out. And it's like, it's almost like an alcoholic until they hit rock bottom, you know, and you're like, hey, you got to get off this speed train of just going and going and going. And I've been there, you know,
Sure.
I did all those same things, but now, like, I spend a lot of time on recovery is just as important to me. Recovery is as much work as that deadlift, that bench press. That is just as important to me. And you know, that makes a huge difference.
What I'm sure you noticed it too, is this is what I've noticed, that the type A personalities, they almost have to get a serious injury before they learn. And it sucks, because it's just like they're out of the fight now, and hopefully not for long. But without that, they just don't learn the lesson, which is unfortunate, but
you know, that's the thing, is they, like I said, it's almost like an alcoholic hitting rock bottom. You know, they either have to have a serious injury, they have to get wrecked metabolically, and you know, they're just in such poor health that they can't do stuff. And again, that almost scares me more than the serious injury.
Sure.
Because, you know, you get wrecked metabolically, you know, their hormones get so messed up that they may not recover out of that. And it's not as easy for people to see too, I think. You know, I've got a couple of friends that I can look at them and be like, man, like, the stuff you've done over the years, it probably felt pretty good at the time, but you know, now you're a mess. You know,
it's coming to get you.
It's coming to get you, and you need a doctor that recognizes it. You need to go to an endocrinologist or somebody and get some of the stuff sorted out. But yeah, absolutely, the type A folks will just run themselves into the ground, and then hopefully, like you said, it doesn't become a permanent thing. We don't lose them completely. You know, we can get them back in there and get them rehabbed and rebuilt. But yeah, that's definitely a thing with the type A's.
I think the other thing you hope doesn't happen is that they don't lose a fight, because that's another case where you'll see that come out. It's like, I'm prepared, and then you just get the shit beat out of you, and you're like, okay, I wasn't. Right. Hopefully it's not too bad, but you know, that's another wake up call.
Yeah. And you know, to some degree in the law enforcement arena, if we can get a minor fight loss, like where it's just enough, it's a just full slap and tickle fight.
Yep.
But it was the first time they really been in a slap and tickle fight, which is, I'm sure you're seeing the same thing in the military. We've got kids that, hey, how many of y'all ever been punched in the face before? And nobody raises their hand. Zero. You know, but maybe it can be a wake up call for them. But yeah, you get that serious one, and man, it can wreck that psyche for so long. You know, that's the challenge in law enforcement, is if it wrecks that psyche, you know, you can do a pretty good job hiding in law enforcement if you want, right? Sure. So now they're not going and doing good police work necessarily all the time. You know, they're off avoiding that fight, you know. But you know, the downside to it is again, we see people that come out of that, and if they're smart, they look at all four areas again, right? They work on the fitness, they work on the psyche, they work on the tactical and technical. And we see them go do that. But a lot of times you see guys go one extreme or another, and it's, you got folks that never hit a weight room, never hit road work, but they'll tell you everything they can about every doodad gun piece of equipment. And, they'll show their 25-yard bull or their speed draw. And then I got other guys that, they can lift small trucks, which is going to be beneficial in a fight.
Yep.
But they don't work on any of their technical skills. And I'm like, do it all, guys. Do it all.
It's cool you can shoot, except you can't patch your own bullet hole inside of your chest. Right. That's a problem.
Yeah. That's great that you can shoot, but I need you shooting 15 seconds before you're ready to shoot, because you can't run as fast as I can. It's that sort of thing that we see all the time, where those four areas, people just can't. And I think we all kind of have a tendency to do that.
Yep.
I'm sure there's people that would look at you or I and say, well, you guys aren't spending enough time on the range. You need to put more time on the range for your job.
Yeah.
You guys are spending too much time in the weight room or the mat room, sort of thing. But I just feel like if you're touching all four of them on a consistent basis, you're well ahead of the curve of most people out there.
Yeah, 100%.
In our professions.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had an idea there and I kind of lost it, but I guess kind of looking at all four of those aspects, and then the health stuff. How frequently would you say you find somebody that actually does all of those fairly well balanced in your career field?
If I were to put a number on it, I would say somebody that does it well balanced, I would say probably 1 out of 20, 1 out of 30.
That's actually probably better than I would have expected.
You're seeing some culture change, where people aren't as adamant that the agency provide them everything that they need. You're seeing some folks that are, I'm hitting the weight room, I'm hitting the mat room, I'm hitting the range on my own. I would say probably 1 out of 30. I see doing that overall aspect. The younger generation, I will say this, the younger generation of kids that I see that are that 1 out of 30, they are better than my generation about the overall health aspect. They'll be more likely to do recovery work than my generation ever was.
Yep. I've definitely seen a huge shift in your average combat arms guy. And I shouldn't say average, but I would say that the guys that are very interested in performance are leaps and bounds above anybody from my generation that hasn't like kind of taken that big step forward, where you got guys now who are looking at, getting their nutrition dialed in, doing the right training, not just the hard training, doing a lot of the smart things. Like they're actually looking at health, like what am I actually putting in the body? How am I performing? How's it affecting my recovery? I think our generation was kind of like, they were good at some things and they were really good at some things. And they kind of really excelled at the technical skills and the tactical skills, which then let them get away with the health stuff a little bit, but it's come to bite them in the ass when they start hitting 50s and 60s.
Yeah. I agree. I think, I don't know if it's maybe because the cultural shift, when we were growing up, yoga was considered weird.
Yeah, yeah.
Only us weirdos did that kind of stuff, right?
Yep.
So, but now, kids are getting introduced to yoga and mindfulness very early on. So I don't know if it's stuff like that. I don't know what it is, but this generation, I think, is much more mindful of their recovery, of their nutrition, those sort of things, than our generation, for sure. Again, amongst not probably your average officer,
right,
but that 1 in 30 that we're talking about, that's mindful of all 4 of those areas. They're much better about not burning themselves out and using good recovery methods, understanding where the nutrition piece fits in it, that sort of thing. But yeah, I agree with you. I think probably our generation got away with it because of the technical and tactical stuff. That would be a whole another interesting conversation, of how technology's affected that
sure.
Maybe this younger generation kind of maybe has, in terms of the tactical and technical stuff, maybe in some ways has an easy button versus our generation,
brute force.
Yeah, it was brute force and the old speed, shock, violence of action.
Yep.
What's this drone? What's these robots?
Well, and so the idea I had earlier kind of came back to me. This kind of ties in. Is I think we see people have the bias sometimes based off their resources. So if I don't have partners to train with, maybe I'm going to focus on the physical in the gym because that's easy. Maybe if I don't have partners to train with and I have a range 5 minutes away, I'm going to bias towards the range. And if I have a martial arts gym that I go to frequently, maybe now I'm going to be more biased into technical skills and be able to train that kind of stuff. So I think there might be a little bit there.
Yeah, I definitely think you have that sort of thing of resource bias, and I think that kind of leads to a cultural bias as well, like within an organization, like an organizational culture. Like if you live in podunk nowhere and there's not a lot of good quality fitness facilities or gyms, you maybe don't do that, but you can go out in any cornfield and go shoot guns.
Sure.
And any farmer will let your agency come on their property and shoot guns. Then you do a lot of firearm stuff. If you don't have that, and that then becomes culture. So then even when an Anytime Fitness comes to Podunk, Indiana,
right,
and gets in there, people still don't use it because they're still so biased on that culture that they're doing that range stuff. So I think that plays into it for sure.
Now with you seeing a lot of these younger kids, do you see a change in, under the psychological coactive, do you see a change in, I don't know, you hear a lot of stuff about like, millennials are weak and all this kind of thing. But I think it's very specific because like a lot of the guys I deal with on the military side, like I don't think they want to be that way so much as like they didn't have a lot of opportunities to be challenged. And once you challenge them, they start to adapt very quickly.
Yes. I would agree with that. There's a difference. They are different.
Sure.
And I'm sure, the boomer generation thought, us Gen Xers, they were like, they're different, but I agree with that assessment that it's not that they're weaker. I think they just haven't been challenged. we're seeing that in how we are having to adapt our field training for them. So for anybody watching this that's not in law enforcement, you go to the academy, you come out of the academy, start working for your agency, and you go into field training where you're riding with a senior officer. You rotate around amongst those officers, and you're evaluated every day, and you've got to hit certain gates. Programs are usually about 18 work weeks, somewhere in there, before you're out on your own, maybe more, maybe less. And that's both an evaluation time and a training time. Well, what we're seeing is with these younger kids, they are they're not used to some of the challenges. They once you give it to them, they'll run with it. They want to perform.
Right.
They find themselves wanting to perform. They've just never been challenged and told, hey, you're going to have to find the answer to this. I'm not going to help you now.
Right.
Okay. And then the first time they do it and they have success with it, they're out of the gates running, I definitely would say that's an aspect of it, is their ability to adapt to that kind of change. That it's a new challenge for us as trainers.
Sure.
And I don't know about in the military, but what we're also finding in law enforcement, I think it's that generational changes, is they're not as necessarily tied into the career and the agency as our generation was.
Sure.
So what we're finding is folks will jump agencies, and like my generation never did that.
Right. You
maybe switched agencies once, but we're seeing people that are on their second or third agency within 10 years. And they don't just feel those same connections.
Sure.
Those sort of things are some of the differences we're seeing with folks. But yeah, this generation, I don't think they're weak. We've seen some great things out of some of these kids. I just think they've came up in a culture that doesn't challenge them to a large degree. And until they get into military or law enforcement or fire, till they get to those sort of no-fail performance matters type jobs, they haven't had those kind of challenges. So they don't know what to do.
Like a skill set, like you said, if you've never been punched in the face before, it's kind of a surprise. But once you've got it, you're kind of like, oh, okay. And you kind of have strategies to deal with it. And I kind of think that goes back to, our generation having the technical and tactical skills, like kind of nailed down without the physical, because we had a generation that lived outdoors growing up versus this generation didn't as much. So they have to focus on the physical a little bit more to catch up, basically.
Yeah.
Because our general physical ability was already there.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a huge component of it. When you look at law enforcement, the history of law enforcement physical tactics training, when you look at it, when I got into it, 25 years ago, and even before that, what it was really based around was our generation or the previous generation having to learn how to control the level of force that they could use.
Right.
Of saying, hey, these are the rules, right?
This is your top limit.
This is your top limit. This is the left and right limit. This is where we're going to work in here.
Right.
And that's use of force models, that's case law, and that's all still important stuff.
Sure.
But now we got kids that don't have the skill sets. They don't have that rough and tumble. Again, they haven't been punched in the face, which, leads into a whole slew of problems the first time they get punched in the face, because if they've never experienced that, they may not maintain emotional control over what's happening, which
Psychological.
will lead them in. Yeah, it's going to lead them into a use of force problem, or they're going to shut down and get hurt.
Right.
So now our training has to focus a little bit on how to deal with people in confrontation, how to handle that punch in the face, how to handle somebody getting like just the verbal
assault
of you know, I had a young recruit in training a couple weeks ago, and they kept on, and we were doing a role playing scenario, and they kept on saying, sir, 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 sir. I'm like, hey, being polite is important, but you're going to go into certain neighborhoods in our community and you call somebody sir, they're going to look at you and know you're a rookie, and they're going to smell blood.
Yeah.
You know, it's that nobody calls them sir.
Sure.
Now, that doesn't mean you get out of the car and, you know, start cussing them out, but you got to learn how to approach people with a certain street culture. And then when people start talking aggressively at you, you got to not shut down and be able to handle that. And that's Craig Douglas calls it verbal agility.
Yeah.
You know, having that verbal agility, just like the physical agility. And again, that comes back to the confidence and the, you know, the 4 areas, and being able to work in those smoothly. That makes a big difference.
That kind of ties into, you know, with the Olympics came up, and there was a lot of discussion about mental health with athletes and stuff. And I don't know if you've seen the Weight of Gold with, what's his name? The swimmer.
Phelps.
Yeah. So Michael Phelps kind of produced this movie, and it was, the basic concept is that athletes after the Olympics experience a ton of depression about 30 days after. So they have this huge high and then they come down. And as you watch it, everything they describe is the exact same as what you hear from military veterans, law enforcement, Neil Armstrong from, you know, the moon mission, stuff like that. So we're always talking about like, oh, it's PTSD. It's like, I think there's something else there. And so I think there's a big difference between mental health and sports psychology. So what we're talking about in the fight is more of a sports psychology. Like, you got to have the tactics that, again, drive that psychology, and the psychology drives the tactics, etc. But then there's the other side, the long-term mental health thing. And we get the two skills mixed up. So we said, oh, you know, certain gymnasts, you know, didn't have mental toughness. It's like, or mental health, I guess, in that case, you know, they're talking about our mental health. And it's like, really, this was a sports psychology issue that stemmed from a lack of mental health long-term. And the coach did not identify the physical presentation she was developing. She was shaking, she wasn't napping. Like, if you see an athlete not having their normal routine, as a coach, you should be like, hey, what's going on? And this is where sports psychology starts coming into it. Like, is this something we can get past with the sports psychology approach, or do we need to shift to mental health? And maybe we do, but I don't think that conversation was at least happening, not in the public, for sure. I don't know if it was happening at the coaching level or not, but
right. Yeah. I talked a little bit about that with some of my combat athletes, of like, you know, we're talking about two different things here, and I'm certainly don't know what was all going on with her in that situation.
Sure.
But you're absolutely right. There's the mental health component to it that's affecting the sports psychology. And it's like, do you have all of that fired on and ready to go? And if it's not at optimum, why is it not? And again, it gets down to the coaching staff has to look at that. And then if we take it back over to the tactical athlete side, it's the same thing, you know, for my guys and gals on my shift or on my tactical team or in your unit. Hey, they're not doing what they normally do, kind of thing. So are they going to be able to perform at a certain level when I need them to? You know, you have to look at that as a leader, whether we're talking about the sport coaching aspect, or in the tactical arena. from a leadership perspective, do I have something going on here that's giving them some long-term performance issues on the mental health side of it? Or are we just off today? Are we just off today? Right. Kind of thing. And that requires you to know your person, know your athlete, if you will. I think it's interesting, the folks that were really critical of that, and wanted to make it some kind of social issue.
Sure.
Those folks have no idea what sports performance and sports psychology, how much that entails.
Yeah.
I remember somebody posted about, I can't remember the dude's name, but he's a sports psychologist. And he's like, during the Olympics, I field 20 calls. I'm not on the Olympic committee. I'm not on an Olympic team, but I'm well enough known that I field 20 calls a day from Olympic athletes in Japan.
Yeah.
Who are like, hey, I've got this thing going on, and like talking them through stuff.
Sure.
It's all that pressure. And it's, you talk about post-deployment and those sort of effects. I can tell you, retiring off the team, 22 years, like leaving that environment, leaving that on-call lifestyle, there was a little dip for me,
Sure.
and I had to find some methods to get through it.
Sure.
And, to get my performance back up. But yeah, it's different for everybody, but there's two components to that,
Yep.
And, I talk a lot about it in terms of, as well, like the don't quit, don't give up kind of attitude that we have sometimes, has usefulness.
Yep.
in the moment.
Sure.
But if you try and carry that over all the time, man, you're just going to grind yourself down.
Like, you burn the chicken, it's okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Not a big deal.
Yeah. I know I can save this chicken. This can still be dinner. No, I can't. It's done, man. It's time to move on,
So it's interesting tying this into the physical realm. So Doc Grove Higgins here in Colorado, me and him were at a nonprofit a couple years ago, about a decade ago, working with a lot of veterans coming back from the GWAT, the main Iraq, Afghanistan wars back in the kind of the peak. And he was finding the vast majority of diagnosed PTSD was actually TBI. It was undiagnosed. So something else that I have talked to a couple other law enforcement guys with is this subclinical TBI from shooting a lot, percussions of demo, driving, fighting, getting hit in the head, all that kind of stuff. You get these little micro like subclinical type of trauma, and you have to wonder how much that's affecting somebody long term, because the only way you can build it back is build up the neurons. You can't you can't take a medicine, it's not going to do anything. The only thing that I've seen from a kind of supplemental-ish type of thing is they have found testosterone does help with TBI. I'm not sure why, but that is one thing. But for the most part, it's really you've got to rebuild the neurons. Either that's through specific exercises, eye drills, neurological stuff, things like that. Is really what kind of builds that stuff back up.
Yeah. So completely anecdotal. Haven't had a diagnosis. I'm assuming. So I talked about that coming off of night shift.
Yep.
And that helping my health. Well, that pretty closely corresponded with me retiring off of SWAT. And I can tell you, I would be shocked. I would be shocked if at that time, I wouldn't, if I went to a doctor, didn't get a TBI diagnosis.
Sure.
You talk about those micro, concussions that happen. In about the year before that, I had 2 close detonations with distraction devices, like failed detonations, where I basically had to do a pull on them to get them to go off with no shielding. We had upped our explosive breaching training.
Yep.
Our range is a 25-yard indoor range that's rifle capable, 12 bays. And we would have 12 guns on the line, 12 SBRs, 11.5 guns, cracking off in there at the same time with just eye and ear pro. And, we'd have body armor on, but we didn't have the helmets. We didn't have anything to protect that concussive blast.
Yep.
On top of that, kickboxing, sparring, that sort of stuff.
Yep.
And since then, I'm on the range less. I'm not getting those flashbang, explosive breaching exposures.
Yep.
I've actually cut down on my kickboxing sparring.
Probably smart.
I'm more and more, I'm reducing the amount of sparring my fighters are doing. And again, we see my performance picking up, improving, those sort of things. Again, it's anecdotal. I never went and got a diagnosis, but I would be shocked. And I'm again, we see trends follow from military to LE.
Law enforcement. Yeah.
I think we're going to see where I think actually NTOA is already recommending it, starting to do some blast measuring and monitoring for that TBI effect. Because I guarantee you there are dudes that are getting it and it's happening to them without a doubt. And then again, you factor on, the majority of, I see it mainly affecting TAC teams because of the amount of flashbangs and again, those are usually the guys shooting short barreled rifles and shoot houses more often, explosive breaching. Again, all those things. I think you add that in to the fact that most SWAT teams in the country are part-time teams. They're not full-time teams.
Sure.
So then those guys are rolling out to night shift, which we know night shift has
fights,
horrible health effects on you.
Yep.
So their brain's getting no recovery.
Yep.
I guarantee it. That'll be a next big thing in LE, mental health, mental wellness.
Sure.
And I agree. I think a lot of our post-traumatic stress diagnosis have some TBI relation.
Sure. Same symptoms, just one's physical and one's not.
Yeah. So, and I think, in the military, again, another way that the military is ahead of LE in some ways is managing, even if it is a post-traumatic stress, I think they're ahead of managing it. There's still a lot of stigma with, getting that post-traumatic stress diagnosis.
Sure.
Where folks, now have this stigma, and it's this syndrome, it's this disorder. I really like how some folks are referring to it now as post-traumatic injury. As like, so injury means I can recover from it, which I think helps a lot of people. And that's that's the key to it. I think for me is when I've been on those critical incidents, I have a whole recovery program in place. When I come off of, some of these scenes, it's like, I'm going to do this. I'm not going to do this. Right. I'm not going to go out and pour myself in a bottle.
Yep.
I'm not going to go and do, whatever it is. I'm going to go work out. I'm going to go do a walk in nature. I've got these folks that I will call that I can specifically talk to, and be like, hey, dude, I just had this go down. Like, wow, man, you want to talk about it? Yup. Those sort of things. But I think in some ways the military has learned a lot of hard lessons about how to manage that. And we're still catching up on this side of the house. And we're not recognizing TBI at all. I don't think we're recognizing it at all.
And like I said, Doc was identifying probably 90% of these guys, had undiagnosed TBI. So it makes you wonder how much is getting missed, and even how do we check it? If it's subclinical, like how much is there to see without an MRI? I don't know. So
right. Yeah.
I suspect the next 10, 20 years, we're going to start finding out a lot more. And maybe there's a biometric or something that we can find and kind of, I don't know, use different metrics to see, maybe it's, I do the Omega Wave every morning, and you've got an electrode on your forehead and your palm, which measures your nervous system. So maybe something like that can start to identify stuff if it's, deviates from the baseline.
Treating a baseline and then as guys go through stuff, can we metric that? That'd be interesting, because you're right. I don't know, short of like it being severe
you never get
MRI,
tested.
Yeah. I mean, you can't MRI everybody. I actually have a buddy who cannot be MRI'd. He still has a bullet in his neck from being shot.
Sure, that's a story.
Yeah. He got shot in a drive-by. He's not a cop. He's a jiu-jitsu guy. He's my jiu-jitsu coach, and he got shot in a drive-by, and there's still pieces of the bullet in his neck. And they're like, yeah, you could never be MRI'd, because if that thing moves, you're dead.
Right.
So, and he's had like all kinds of neck problems. They've had to use x-rays and all kinds of stuff to help him out. But I mean, that kind of thing, those would be challenges that would have to be overcome, because there's certainly a lot of dudes that have metal in them from incidents,
So like right now the Army uses this whole testing thing that's like a lot of reaction time stuff, but just me doing a lot of self-testing, I'm like, you have to have a lot of data points to actually make sure you have a baseline. But they test it once before your deployment and once after. I'm like, that's not really a good baseline to actually tell if you shifted. Okay, so maybe throughout your career you have 3 to 5 of those. Like, that's, to me, that's just not frequent enough. And that's why I like Omega Wave. I just don't know if I can do it. I don't know if it actually would affect it.
Right. That you'd almost have to have somebody that you had on Omega Wave pre-deployment, and when they came back, you knew there's a high likelihood of them having TBI, and then
see what the difference
would be, and then do that across enough people.
Yep. Which I've argued for a while that the military already does not do enough health metrics. Like, when I come in, I should have, at 17, 18 years old, I should take my testosterone, and every quarter for my entire career, all my hormones should be tested. My cortisol should be tested, vitamin D, like the full 9 yards. You'll be lucky if you get it every couple of years. And they're definitely not checking hormones. I have to do that on my own.
Yeah. Nobody's doing that. We're not doing it on this side of the house. Now, the cool thing that my organization, because we have this in-house athletic trainer that we're doing, and be interested to get your input on this.
Yeah.
She's going to start doing movement screens for everybody where they are right now.
Yep.
movement screens, going to use FMS
Mm-hmm.
protocols for movement screens. So that way, when somebody comes in injured, especially if they are moved to a light duty or no duty status,
Yep.
and moved into treatment with her, we have an actual metric of this was their pre-injury. This is where their screen was.
Yep.
Now, as we're doing treatment, this is where their screen was. Now they're back to where they were, so we can bring them back to a duty status.
Sure.
Yeah. So that's kind of cool.
So FMS, so I used it a long time ago, used it a lot for a lot. And so what I find is that the people that argue against it are generally sole proprietors, and they don't have to teach a bunch of interns. They don't have to teach other coaches. They don't have to teach guys who have no fitness experience. And so for them, they're like, oh, I just watch the athletes. Like, that's cool for you. But how do you spread that across a large organization? And so the FMS does help with things like that. Is the data perfect? Probably not, but I think it's at least an indication. Like, you can at least use it. And if you're a good practitioner, you're kind of like, all right, I know this is just this individual had issues with this today, or they don't have the skill set for an overhead squat. Got it. Instead of just looking at the raw score. Now, something that Cal had talked about on Return to Play is he's actually they've been using a lot of the peaking exercises. It's all the band stuff that's really fast, really explosive, rebound explosive, but it's not heavily loaded, so that way the athlete can actually, get back to full performance. And so they're kind of using some of those peaking exercises before they get there. And then he's also got the 10-20 time stuff that'll tell you, hey, do you need eccentric, concentric, isometric, whatever, as a baseline. And so somebody had asked at one of the workshops, what do you do with a tactical guy who's constantly broken? And his answer was, you're probably not going to test their 10 and 20 because they're almost always going to need strength because they're broken. So until you get them past that point of no longer, like, once they're functional again, then you can test it. But until then, they're probably just going to need strength because they're broken. And they're broken for a reason. There's something in the chain, whether they're strong or not, something in the chain is broken. And that portion needs to be strengthened, not necessarily their deadlift number, their squat number, their, whatever. But the specific piece in the chain that is being deficient is what you need to clean up. And once you clean that up, then you can test it.
So was his solution for that, for the tactical athlete that's broken, was it just the coach watching the athlete, or did he have something besides the 10-20?
So with him and his interns, like, they've got a process of just looking at the athlete. And I mean, he's got like $500,000 like camera systems that breaks all the like motion down and stuff. So he's got a little bit different environment. So it's hard to kind of spread that across, but the basic gist was look at the athlete, do an assessment. Is it the foot? Is it the ankle? Is it the knee? Like, where's the deficiency at? And I don't know if you read the recovery manual that a lot of that cheat sheet came from. But some of the gist in that was, we build compensation patterns, and once the recovery is actually fixed, we just never change the nervous system. And so it's generally a neurological issue that just has to be corrected. So that's kind of the basis behind the recovery stuff, focusing on the vestibular first, the visual first, the proprioceptive first. Because if you can reset the nervous system, chances are that whatever reason why your motor pattern is incorrect will probably be fixed.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that sort of stuff is, I think, again, as you start to see LE kind of catch up with a lot of this stuff and just get away from, or I hope, get away from like these just, hey, just do this package over here of all this stuff of let's assess the athlete. Let's start building in-house assessments. Let's have folks on staff. And you're seeing that more and more where agencies are bringing in athletic trainers for recovery, to fix problems, to take care of workers' comp stuff. And then they also are moving into having true strength and conditioning coaches, which when I came in the career field was was unheard of.
Yeah,
You know, it's just
100%.
absolutely unheard of. But now you have organizations that have dedicated strength and conditioning coaches,
Nice.
who build programs, who work with folks, who do assessment. You know, that's really what you need. That's how you're going to build that health and longevity over the long term.
Right.
You know, it goes back to building that culture again, you know, building culture, and putting the right things in place.
I think one of the issues we see at the organizational level, specifically in the DoD, is we want to have these set tests and metrics that last forever. You know, I mean, the last PT test we had lasted for over 40 years. And to me, okay, so maybe we need something for admin. Got it. You know, because realistically, that's what PT tests are. They're for admin. They're not really assessing combat fitness or anything else. But everything else should be adaptable every year. So you've got this system, but it should be a system of everybody's constantly being educated on the new stuff. And how you do that is going to be a challenge for sure. But instead of being this strict, rigid, like we're going to test this, this, and this, and this, and I think that's where we have a lot of issues, is that the Army tried to implement things like the FMS, you know, and they would do train the trainers. Those guys would get out, like, and then what? Like, then the knowledge is lost, and then they didn't do anything. Yep. I had guys come to me who said they, you know, went through the train the trainer course, and they had no clue of what the actual FMS was, like as far as like the actual instructions, the exercises. I'm like, what are they teaching you? So there's watering down there. So yeah, you can teach these rigid structures, and I think for your organization, it's probably going to work because one athletic trainer, she's going to control all of it, so it's probably not that big a deal. And those metrics would be pretty solid. But trying to do that across an organization, there's got to be a little bit more flexibility, even with large organizations, and that's a challenge for the future. But I think the 21st century is going to require that.
Yeah, I think, you know, that on our end, in the LE world, and I know this is true to some degree in the fire world, and I'm assuming it's probably true for DoD, is our applicant pools are shrinking. There are less people that want to come and do these jobs.
Yep.
You know, people can say whatever they want about millennials, the age group, whatever, but the simple fact of the matter is it's less and less and less. So you get people into these career fields, you need to do stuff to retain them and keep them healthy.
Yep.
And keep them in the mission task. And you know, you're absolutely right. It has to be adaptable. Maybe FMS isn't the thing to do. Again, you know, we're in the same boat. The state of Indiana uses the Cooper test for the academy.
Little old.
Good old Cooper test. 1.5 mile run, 300 meters.
Yep.
Push-ups, sit-ups, vertical jump, you know. And they've had that for 30 years.
Yeah. 80s.
You know, and they aren't getting rid of it. And no desire to change it. None at all. And you know, so is that really adaptable to what my organization needs?
Right.
You know, it doesn't factor in a lot of things that, you know, I work for a municipality.
Yep.
So, you know, there's going to be things, being able to pull yourself over a fence is a job requirement, but there's no test of pull strength in that test, you know. So there needs to be adaptability.
Sure.
And it changes within the unit, you know, or within the organization, the different units.
Yep.
You know, we have a separate PT test for our SWAT team. We have a separate PT test for a tactical support unit that's out there, and they all run these different tests based on the mission set.
Sure.
and those are evaluated within those units over time. Do those need to be adapted or changed to how our job is changing?
Yep.
Or what the knowledge that we know, about physical performance and how it translates over to technical tactical.
Yep.
Because again, there's a lot of people who don't study those sort of things still look at something like the Cooper test as a valid way of, well, yeah, I mean, if you can do X number, I forget what the push-up number is, something ridiculously low, if you can do push-ups, then you're strong, you have upper body strength.
Right.
Again, it sort of goes back to the earlier conversation. You can bench press twice your body weight, you're strong. Okay. Is it strong enough?
Yeah.
Maybe. Maybe not. I don't know. But I know that somewhere in between that, I think it's 29 push-ups and bench pressing twice your body weight is probably the answer.
Right.
Because 29 push-ups isn't really going to do a lot for you. Benching twice your body weight is going to take a lot of time and effort away from everything else we're doing.
Yep.
So maybe we find something in between,
Yep.
So organization and adaptability is always a challenge, especially when you start looking at how you want to bring all that stuff together.
Sure.
And again, ultimately, all these tests or whatever we're talking about, they aren't for the end user, the performer.
Right.
They're for the organization.
Yep.
And that's all they are. Whether we're talking about a PT test, a qualification, a firearms qualification, a driving qualification.
Yep.
None of that matters.
It's interesting when you see the pro sports combines. They don't do it every year. They do it once, and then it is strictly how they perform on the field, and that's it.
Yep. Yeah.
So I feel the big gap we have in the tactical world is that we don't have an effective way to do scrimmage and actually assess how people perform other than real incidences, which is like going to the Super Bowl and like, okay, that's how we're going to evaluate. And that's it. You don't get the scrimmages. You don't get the practices. You don't get any of that other stuff. And that's really all we have is we've got the Super Bowl and we've got like this gym stuff. It's like, that's cool, but there's a lot in between that we could be assessing and we just don't have the capacity to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no real good metrics, especially for organizations to implement, that account for all those variables that you have. You're absolutely right. It's, the old saying is all training is fake, and we're just trying to give you the best fake stuff that we can.
Right.
But really, even then, we don't know how to evaluate that fake stuff we give you.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. Cool, man. Well, I'm short on time. I don't know how you are.
Yeah, I am too. Yep.
Okay.
So
cool. All right, man, this is good. I think we covered a lot of stuff. So I think it was good.
Yeah.
I'm gonna at some point see if I can figure out the Zoom thing to do you and a couple other dudes and kind of do a roundtable and talk shop and do that kind of stuff. I think that'll be good. But yeah, I think we covered a lot. This is some good stuff.
Yeah. I think it was a great conversation. I'd love to get some other dudes in here and get some perspective of what we're all seeing and what we're all doing and where to take things. So
look
forward to it.
All right, man. Well, I will see you later, and I will see you in the app for sure.
Yeah, I'll see you in the app. Yeah.
All right, man.
All right.
Later.
Take care, bro.